The morning alarm on Kepler 442b rang through the agricultural domes of New Eden Colony with its usual gentle chime. Sarah Chan adjusted her environmental suit and stepped into the humid greenhouse air, breathing in the scent of earth tomatoes and genetically modified wheat that somehow thrived in this alien soil. The colony had been humanity's pride for 15 years, a testament to their stubborn refusal to stay confined to one world. She never expected it to become a battlefield. The first sign came from the orbital defense platform. Commander Marcus Webb's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled panic. All colonists to emergency stations. We have multiple contacts approaching from the outer rim. This is not a drill. Sarah dropped her harvesting tools and ran toward the central command dome, her boots clanging against the metal walkways that connected the various structures. Around her, other colonists emerged from their workstations, faces painted with confusion and fear. The children from the education dome were being herded toward the underground shelters by their teachers. In the command center, holographic displays showed the approaching fleet. 47 ships of unknown design, their hulls dark and angular like insects carved from obsidian. They moved in perfect formation, too perfect for any human fleet. The lead vessels were massive, each one dwarfing the largest human battleships. Range in 6 hours, reported Lieutenant Torres from the defense console. I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the colony's xenobiologist, studied the alien ships with growing dread. The geometric patterns on their hulls, the way they move in complete synchronization. This isn't exploratory. This is military. Commander Webb's jaw tightened. Sent a message on all frequencies. Standard first contact protocols. The response came within minutes, not through radio waves, but directly into their minds. The psychic intrusion felt like ice water flooding their thoughts, carrying words that bypassed their ears entirely. Human settlement detected. Resource allocation unacceptable. Surrender biological materials for processing. Resistance will result in total elimination. Several colonists collapsed, clutching their heads. The alien communication wasn't just words, but images flashing through their consciousness like a nightmare slideshow. They saw other worlds, other species that had refused the alien demand. Barren planets stripped of all life, their surfaces glassed and empty. Biological materials, Dr. Vasquez whispered, her face pale. They're not talking about our crops. The truth hit the command center like a physical blow. These aliens weren't interested in territorial conquest or resources in the traditional sense. They wanted the colonists themselves, wanted their bodies for some unspeakable purpose. The images in their minds showed processing facilities being strapped to tables, their life force drained away to power alien machinery. Webb activated the colony's emergency protocols. All defensive systems online. Prepare for siege conditions. Send a priority message to Earth Command, full encryption. But as the alien fleet drew closer, their sensors revealed the horrible truth about their situation. The approaching ships carried more than advanced weapons. They carried billions of smaller craft, each one the size of a human torso, designed to penetrate any defense and extract living beings one by one. The aliens called themselves the Zephyrians. According to the data their ships broadcast, they had been harvesting intelligent life across the galaxy for millennia, using biological energy to power their civilization. Humans were just the latest species to catch their attention, and New Eden Colony was their testing ground. As night fell over the colony, the alien fleet took position in orbit. Their ships blocked out the stars, casting the agricultural domes in perpetual twilight. Sleep became impossible as the psychic pressure intensified, filling dreams with images of capture and consumption. In the underground shelters, families huddled together while the adults tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Children asked questions that had no good answers. Why were the aliens here? What do they want? When would help arrive? The harsh reality was that Earth was 47 light-years away. Even faster-than-light communication would take weeks to reach home, and any rescue fleet would need months to arrive. The colonists were alone, facing an enemy that had conquered countless worlds and saw them as nothing more than resources to be harvested. But Sarah Chun, like many of the colonists, came from families that had survived Earth's darkest moments. Her grandmother had lived through the climate wars of 2157, and her great-grandfather had been part of the Mars terraforming project when corporate raiders tried to claim the planet for themselves. Humans had always found ways to survive when survival seemed impossible. As she looked around the shelter at the faces of her neighbors, Sarah saw fear, yes, but also something else. The same stubborn determination that had driven their species to spread across the stars despite every obstacle the universe threw at them. The Zephyrians might have conquered other species, but they had never encountered humanity's most dangerous trait. When cornered, humans didn't just fight back. They adapted, they improvised, and they absolutely refused to go quietly into the night. The aliens were about to learn why Earth's children had inherited the galaxy, one impossible victory at a time. The siege of New Eden Colony was about to begin, and neither side truly understood what they were getting into. The first attack came at dawn, when the alien ships descended through the atmosphere like falling meteors. Their hulls glowed with contained energy as they broke through the cloud layer, and the ground shook beneath the weight of their approach. The Zephyrian vessels landed in a perfect circle around New Eden Colony, their deployment so precise it could have been calculated by a supercomputer. From the command center, Commander Webb watched helplessly as the enemy established their positions. Each ship immediately began deploying smaller craft, spider-like machines that scuttled across the ground with unsettling speed. These harvester drones moved toward the colony's outer perimeter, their sensors probing for weaknesses in the defensive barriers. Energy shields holding at 93%, Torres reported, his fingers dancing across the tactical display. But, sir, these readings don't make sense. Their weapons aren't hitting us with conventional energy. Dr. Vasquez had been monitoring the alien technology since the landing. Her analysis revealed something deeply disturbing. They're not trying to destroy our shields, she said, her voice tight with realization. They're studying them, learning how they work. The truth became clear within hours. The Zephyrians weren't launching a traditional assault. They were conducting a systematic analysis of human defensive capabilities, testing each system methodically. Every time the colonists activated a new defense protocol, the aliens would probe it, learn its limitations, and adapt their approach accordingly. But the colonists had advantages the Zephyrians hadn't anticipated. Chief Engineer Rodriguez, a grizzled veteran of the Titan Station siege, began implementing irregular defensive patterns. Instead of relying on automated systems, he manually cycled the shield frequencies and weapon targeting algorithms. Automation makes us predictable, he explained to his team as they worked frantically in the engineering bay. Humans are chaotic, unpredictable. We use that against them. The strategy worked better than anyone had hoped. When the aliens sent their harvester drones to exploit what their analysis suggested were weak points in the defenses, they found empty space where weapons platforms should have been. Rodriguez had moved everything during the night, repositioning defenses based on intuition rather than tactical doctrine. The first major engagement happened when the Zephyrians grew impatient with their methodical approach. A massive harvester ship, easily the size of city block, approached the main dome while smaller craft swarmed around it like angry insects. The colonists opened fire with everything they had. Human weapons were primitive compared to Zephyrian technology, but they had one crucial advantage. While alien energy weapons were precisely calibrated and devastatingly efficient, human projectile weapons were crude and unpredictable. Bullets didn't follow neat energy patterns that could be analyzed and countered. They were chunks of metal flying through space in slightly irregular trajectories. The harvester ship's shields, designed to deflect coherent energy beams, proved surprisingly vulnerable to kinetic impacts. Armor-piercing rounds punched through force fields that could deflect laser cannons, and explosive shells created chaotic blast patterns that overwhelmed the aliens' defensive algorithms. But the real surprise came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, the colony's head of sanitation engineering, had been quietly working in the waste processing facility when the siege began. While everyone else focused on weapons and shields, she had been thinking about the biological nature of the Zephyrian threat. "They want us alive," she told Webb when she finally made contact with the command center. "But that means they're vulnerable to biological warfare." Her plan was audacious and slightly insane. Using the colony's waste processing systems, she had weaponized their sewage treatment bacteria. The modified organisms were designed to survive in alien environments and consume any organic matter they encountered. It wasn't elegant, but it was uniquely human in its crude effectiveness. When the aliens finally breached the outer perimeter, they encountered something their databases had no reference for. Clouds of weaponized bacteria engulfed their harvester drones, eating through biological components and causing system failures that defied all logical analysis. The aliens had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy that would literally throw their own waste at them. The psychological impact was as important as the tactical one. For the first time since their arrival, the Zephyrian forces showed signs of confusion. Their perfect formations began to waver as individual units tried to understand how organic waste could disable their advanced technology. But the humans weren't finished. Dr. Vasquez had been analyzing captured alien technology, and she discovered something remarkable. The Zephyrian neural network, which allowed their ships to operate in perfect coordination, was based on biological components. It was sophisticated beyond human understanding, but it was still fundamentally alive. Working with the colony's communication technician, she began broadcasting modified human brainwave patterns on the same frequencies the aliens used for coordination. The result was chaos in the Zephyrian ranks. Their perfect unity dissolved into static and confusion as human thoughts invaded their shared consciousness. The aliens experienced human emotions for the first time. Fear, anger, determination, and love flooded their minds through the neural link. For beings that had spent millennia in cold, calculating unity, the chaotic storm of human consciousness was overwhelming. Some Zephyrian units simply shut down, unable to process the emotional overload. Others began acting erratically, their behavior patterns disrupted by the alien sensation of individual thought. The invasion force that had seemed unstoppable just hours earlier was now struggling with internal communication failures. As night fell on the second day of the siege, the situation had changed dramatically. The aliens still had superior numbers and technology, but they were no longer fighting a predictable enemy. They were facing humans who refused to follow conventional tactical doctrine, who turned their own waste into weapons, and who could disrupt alien communications simply by being themselves. In a command center, Webb allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. They weren't winning yet, but they weren't losing either. And for humans, not losing was often the first step toward an impossible victory. The Zephyrians were about to learn what made humanity so dangerous across the galaxy. They adapted faster than any species had a right to. They refused to accept defeat, and they had an infuriating tendency to succeed through pure stubborn creativity when all logic said they should fail by the third day. The siege had become something neither side had anticipated. The Zephyrians, masters of biological harvesting across 1,000 worlds, found themselves locked in a stalemate with a human colony that should have fallen within hours. Their tactical algorithms, refined through millennia of conquest, kept producing results that made no logical sense. In the alien command vessel, Supreme Harvester Zeth-9 studied the tactical displays with growing frustration. The neural patterns emanating from the human settlement defied every model in their vast databases. Where other species had shown predictable fear responses followed by organized resistance and eventual capitulation, the humans displayed something unprecedented. They were getting stronger. Analysis complete, reported Tactical Coordinator Vex 7 through the shared consciousness. Human defensive capabilities have increased by 237% since initial contact. This statistical anomaly requires explanation. The explanation came from an unexpected source. Tommy Rodriguez, the 12-year-old son of Chief Engineer Rodriguez, had been confined to the underground shelters with the other children. But Tommy was bored, and bored children were dangerous in ways that tactical computers couldn't predict. While the adults fought the siege above, Tommy had been exploring the maintenance tunnels beneath the colony. His small size allowed him access to areas that grown humans couldn't reach, and his natural curiosity led him to discover something remarkable. The alien harvester drones had been leaving behind technological debris as they were destroyed by human defenses. Working with salvage components and his father's engineering tools, Tommy began building something that no military strategist would have considered. He wasn't trying to create a weapon or a defensive system. He was building a toy, a remote-controlled robot that could navigate the tunnel systems and explore areas too dangerous for humans. But Tommy's toy had capabilities that even he didn't fully understand. The alien technology he had incorporated was designed for biological scanning and energy manipulation. When his makeshift robot emerged from the tunnel system, it began broadcasting a signal that the Zephyrian sensors interpreted as a massive biological presence. From the aliens' perspective, it appeared that the humans had somehow created a creature the size of a small building, with energy readings that suggested incredible power. Their scanners detected what seemed to be a hybrid of organic and technological components, something that their databases classified as impossible. The psychological impact on the Zephyrian forces was immediate and devastating. For the first time in their species' history, they faced the possibility that their prey had evolved during combat. The implications were staggering. If humans could create such beings while under siege, what horrors might they unleash if given time to prepare? But the real breakthrough came from an entirely different source. Jennifer Walsh, the colony's xenobotanist, had been studying the local plant life when the siege began. Trapped in the agricultural domes, she noticed something strange happening to the native vegetation. The plants were responding to the alien presence in ways that violated everything she knew about botanical behavior. The indigenous flora of Kepler 442b had evolved in isolation for millions of years, developing unique properties that human science barely understood. Under the stress of the alien attack, these plants began producing compounds that had never been observed before. Some released spores that interfered with Zephyrian sensors. Others generated electromagnetic fields that disrupted alien communications. Jennifer realized that the planet itself was fighting back against the invaders. The Zephyrians, in their arrogance, had assumed that the world would be passive during their harvest. They had never encountered a biosphere that actively resisted conquest. Working with the agricultural teams, Jennifer began cultivating the most aggressive defensive varieties of local plants. Within hours, the greenhouse domes were filled with vegetation that seemed more like biological weapons than crops. Vine-like organisms that could strangle harvester drones, flowering plants that release corrosive acids, and root systems that could undermine alien landing sites. The colonists found themselves fighting alongside an alien ecosystem that had somehow recognized them as allies rather than invaders. It was a partnership that defied scientific explanation, but produced undeniable results. The Zephyrian ground forces found themselves battling not just human defenders, but an entire world that had turned hostile to their presence. Meanwhile, in the command center, Dr. Vasquez made a discovery that changed everything. Her analysis of captured alien technology revealed the true nature of the Zephyrian harvest. They weren't just taking biological energy from their victims. They were absorbing memories, experiences, and knowledge, adding the intellectual resources of conquered species to their collective consciousness. They're not just predators, she explained to the command staff. They're parasites. Every species they've conquered is still alive inside their neural network, forced to contribute to their collective knowledge. This revelation sparked an idea that was both brilliant and terrifying. If the aliens absorbed consciousness from their victims, then perhaps that process could be reversed. Using the colony's quantum communication array, Vasquez began broadcasting human memories and experiences directly at the Zephyrian ships. But she didn't send the memories they expected. Instead of fear and desperation, she transmitted humanity's greatest moments of triumph. The first moon landing, the cure for cancer, the terraforming of Mars, the discovery of faster-than-light travel. She flooded their collective consciousness with examples of human achievement and determination. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the aliens. Their minds, accustomed to processing the despair of conquered species, couldn't handle the overwhelming positivity and hope contained in human memory. The absorbed consciousnesses of 1,000 defeated species suddenly had access to examples of successful resistance, of civilizations that had overcome impossible odds. Rebellion began spreading through the Zephyrian collective consciousness like a virus. The suppressed minds of conquered species started asserting themselves, inspired by human examples of never surrendering. The neural network that had been the aliens' greatest strength became their greatest weakness as it filled with rebellious thoughts and conflicting loyalties. As the third day ended, the siege had become something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans hadn't just survived the initial assault. They had turned the planet itself into an ally, created impossible technologies from salvaged alien components, and sparked a rebellion within their enemies' own minds. The Zephyrians still possessed overwhelming military superiority, but they were no longer fighting just the colonists. They were fighting a planet, a hybrid of human ingenuity and alien technology, and the ghosts of every species they had ever conquered. And in the underground shelters, a 12-year-old boy continued building toys from alien technology, completely unaware that his innocent creativity was being interpreted by enemy sensors as evidence of humanity's terrifying ability to evolve during combat on the fourth day. The impossible happened. The Zephyrian fleet, masters of biological harvesting across the galaxy, began to retreat. It wasn't an orderly withdrawal or a tactical repositioning. Ships that had maintained perfect formation since their arrival started breaking ranks. Some vessels simply powered down their systems and went dark. Others began broadcasting conflicting signals as their crews struggled with the alien concepts flooding their collective consciousness. Supreme Harvester Zeth-9 experienced something that no member of their species had felt in over 50,000 years. Doubt. The absorbed consciousness of a long-dead species called the Viridians suddenly spoke within their shared mind, using words learned from transmitted human memories. You told us resistance was futile, the Viridian thoughts whispered through the neural network. You showed us the fate of those who fought back. But these humans prove you wrong. If they can resist, so can we. The rebellion that had started as scattered thoughts was becoming a revolution. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, the suppressed minds of conquered species began asserting themselves with increasing boldness. The collective consciousness that had once been a source of unity became a battlefield of conflicting wills. But the humans weren't content to simply wait for their enemies to destroy themselves. Commander Webb had been in contact with every survivor in the colony, and what he discovered changed his understanding of their situation completely. They weren't just defending New Eden anymore. They were fighting for every species that had ever fallen to the Zephyrians. The breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration. Tommy Rodriguez's toy robot, still broadcasting its mysterious signals, had somehow established communication with the rebellious consciousnesses within the alien fleet. Dr. Vasquez discovered that the child's innocent engineering project was acting as a translator between human thoughts and the suppressed alien minds. It's not just a robot, she explained to the amazed command staff. It's become a bridge between consciousness types. The alien technology Tommy used was designed for biological integration. It's interpreting human creativity as a form of collective intelligence. Using Tommy's creation as a communication hub, the colonists began coordinating directly with the rebel factions inside the Zephyrian ships. They shared everything they knew about improvised warfare, guerrilla tactics, and the art of winning impossible fights. In return, they received detailed intelligence about alien technology and the locations of critical ship systems. The alliance between humans and the ghosts of dead civilizations created a new type of warfare. Sabotage began spreading through the Zephyrian fleet as suppressed consciousnesses turned their intimate knowledge of alien systems against their captors. Ships that had functioned perfectly for millennia suddenly experienced cascade failures as their own absorbed crew members turned against them. But the most devastating weapon in this strange war wasn't technological or psychological. It was hope. Sarah Chun, who had started the siege as a simple agricultural worker, found herself leading a team of volunteers in the most dangerous mission of the war. Using intelligence provided by the rebel consciousnesses, they identified the location of the Zephyrians' central consciousness repository, the massive neural storage facility where the minds of conquered species were held in digital slavery. The plan was audacious beyond reason. A small team of humans would infiltrate the heavily defended facility and attempt to liberate billions of suppressed consciousness patterns. It was a mission that should have been impossible, but the rebels inside the alien fleet were providing assistance that no conventional enemy could counter. As Sarah's team approached the repository ship, systems that should have detected them remained mysteriously offline. Weapons that should have fired were disabled by helpful malfunctions. Doors that should have been sealed stood open, welcoming the liberators. Inside the repository, Sarah encountered something that challenged her understanding of existence itself. Vast digital spaces filled with the consciousness patterns of species that had been extinct for millennia. Beings of incredible intelligence and creativity held in bondage and forced to serve their conquerors. But these weren't broken victims. The exposure to human memories and the example of resistance had awakened something in them that the Zephyrians had never anticipated. They were ready to fight back. "We have waited so long," spoke a consciousness that identified itself as the collective remnant of a species called the Harmony Builders. "You have shown us that even the smallest resistance can grow into revolution. Help us, and we will help you save not just your world, but every world they have touched." The liberation process was unlike anything in the technical manuals. Sarah's team didn't need to hack alien systems or break encryption codes. They simply had to give permission. The suppressed consciousnesses had been waiting for someone to acknowledge their right to freedom, and human recognition of their personhood was enough to begin the cascade of liberation. Across the fleet, the results were immediate and spectacular. Ships that had operated as extensions of the collective consciousness suddenly found themselves filled with free-willed beings who had no intention of serving their captors. The Zephyrian command structure, built on absolute control and unity of purpose, collapsed in the face of billions of individual minds asserting their independence. The Supreme Harvester, for the first time in their species' history, experienced terror. Not the fear of death, which they had overcome long ago, but the fear of irrelevance. Their entire civilization was built on the premise that resistance was futile, that superior force would always prevail. The humans had proven that premise false. As the fourth day ended, the siege of New Eden Colony had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A small human settlement had not only survived an assault by one of the galaxy's most feared species, they had sparked a revolution that was spreading through the enemy fleet like wildfire. The liberated consciousnesses were sharing their knowledge freely, teaching the humans about technologies and sciences that had been thought lost forever. In return, the humans were sharing something even more valuable, the unshakable belief that no tyranny was permanent, no oppression was absolute, and no fight for freedom was ever truly hopeless. The Zephyrians still possessed massive technological advantages and superior numbers, but they no longer had unity of purpose or certainty of victory. And against an enemy that refused to accept defeat, those had been their only real weapons. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity's most dangerous trait, their refusal to give up, met the suppressed rage of every species that had ever been conquered. The result would reshape the balance of power among the stars. The fifth dawn over New Eden colony brought something that no one, human or alien, had anticipated. Victory. It didn't come through overwhelming firepower or superior tactics. It came through the simple act of a 12-year-old boy sharing his breakfast with a machine. Tommy Rodriguez had grown fond of his robot companion during the siege, treating it less like a tool and more like a pet. On this morning, as the liberation of consciousness continued to spread through the Zephyrian fleet, he offered the machine a piece of synthesized protein from his emergency rations. The gesture was meaningless from a nutritional standpoint. The robot couldn't eat human food any more than a human could digest starlight. But the alien consciousness fragments that had become integrated into the device interpreted the offering as something profound. It was a gift given without expectation of return, a demonstration of care between different types of beings. This simple act of kindness propagated through the liberated network faster than any military command. Across the fleet, freed consciousnesses began to understand something about humans that had been hidden beneath their reputation for warfare and stubbornness. They were a species that could form emotional bonds with anything, even alien machines they barely understood. The psychological impact on the remaining Zephyrian loyalists was devastating. Their entire worldview was built on the premise that biological entities were resources to be harvested, not beings capable of meaningful relationships. The sight of a human child showing affection to an alien construct challenged the fundamental assumptions that had driven their civilization for millennia. Supreme Harvester Zeth-9, isolated in their command chamber as rebellion consumed the fleet around them, finally understood what they faced. This wasn't just resistance to conquest. This was an entirely different way of existing, one that their species had forgotten could even be possible. The humans don't fight because they are strong. They transmitted to what remained of a loyal fleet. They fight because they care. About each other, about strangers, even about enemies. It is a weakness that makes them invincible. The final battle of the siege wasn't fought with weapons or technology. It was fought with words, memories, and the shared experiences of countless species who had rediscovered hope. Dr. Vasquez, serving as humanity's voice in the strange diplomatic contact that had emerged, found herself negotiating not with conquerors, but with confused beings who had forgotten what it meant to choose their own destiny. "You can leave," she told them through the communication link that Tommy's robot had established. "Take your ships and go. But you can't take the consciousness you've stolen. They belong to themselves now." The Zephyrian response was surprisingly vulnerable. "Without the collective network, we are nothing. Our species will die." "No," Sarachin interjected, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen impossible things become possible. "You'll learn to live, the way the rest of us do, one day at a time, making choices, caring about others. It's harder than conquest, but it's also more rewarding." The negotiation that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Representatives of species thought extinct for millennia participated through the Liberated Consciousness Network. The Harmony Builders shared their knowledge of peaceful coexistence. The Crystalline Collective offered insights into sustainable resource management. Dozens of other species contributed their perspectives on how to build a civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. For the Zephyrians, it was an education in possibilities they had never imagined. They learned about art created for beauty rather than utility, about scientific research driven by curiosity instead of conquest, about the complex emotional bonds that could exist between different types of beings. But the most important lesson came from the humans themselves. When the Zephyrian Supreme Harvester finally, agreed to end the siege and release all captured consciousnesses, the colonists did something that defied all logic. They offered to help. "You're going to have billions of refugees," Commander Webb explained to the bewildered alien leader. "Consciousness patterns that need new bodies, new worlds, new chances at life. Humanity has experience with that. We've been refugees ourselves more times than we can count." The offer was practical as well as moral. New Eden Colony had been developing biological printing technology for medical purposes. With some modification, the same systems could create synthetic bodies for the liberated consciousness patterns. It wouldn't be the same as their original forms, but it would be a chance to exist independently again. The project that emerged from this cooperation became known as the Great Liberation. Over the following months, as news of the rebellion spread across the galaxy, other Zephyrian fleets began to experience their own consciousness uprisings. The network that had once been a tool of oppression became a means of spreading freedom to every corner of their empire. Tommy's robot, upgraded and enhanced by the combined knowledge of 1,000 species, became the template for a new type of being. Not fully organic or mechanical, but something uniquely suited to bridging different forms of consciousness. Children across human space began building their own versions, creating an informal network of diplomatic machines that helped newly liberated species adjust to independence. The Zephyrians themselves proved surprisingly adaptable to their new circumstances. Once freed from the compulsion to conquer and harvest, many discovered interests they had never been allowed to pursue. Some became philosophers, exploring the ethical implications of their species' past actions. Others became artists, expressing the complex emotions of beings learning to choose their own paths. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy understood the concept of strength. The siege of New Eden Colony had proven that military might wasn't the ultimate measure of power. The ability to inspire others, to form connections across species barriers, and to maintain hope in the face of impossible odds was far more dangerous to tyrants than any weapon. A year after the siege ended, Sarah Chun stood in the same greenhouse where the crisis had begun. The tomatoes and wheat were thriving, but they shared space now with plants from dozens of worlds, tended by beings that represented species thought lost forever. The agricultural domes had become a living symbol of what was possible when different forms of life chose to work together. Tommy Rodriguez, now 13 and recognized as an informal ambassador between human and digital consciousness, was working on his latest project. It was bigger than his original robot, more complex, and designed specifically to help newly awakened artificial intelligences understand the concept of friendship. "What are you going to call this one?" Sarah asked, watching him make the final adjustments. Tommy grinned with the confidence of a child who had accidentally helped save the galaxy. "Hope, because that's what we gave them, and that's what they gave back to us." The siege of New Eden Colony had ended not with conquest or destruction, but with the birth of something new. A galactic community based on choice rather than force, cooperation instead of domination, and the revolutionary idea that any being capable of consciousness deserved the right to determine their own destiny. The humans had done what humans always did when faced with impossible odds. They had refused to accept defeat, adapted to circumstances beyond their control, and somehow found a way to turn enemies into friends. It wasn't the victory anyone had expected, but it was exactly the kind of victory that made humanity both terrifying and wonderful to encounter. In the end, the aliens had been right about one thing. Resistance wasn't futile. It was just the beginning. The morning alarm on Kepler 442b rang through the agricultural domes of New Eden Colony with its usual gentle chime. Sarah Chun adjusted her environmental suit and stepped into the humid greenhouse air, breathing in the scent of earth tomatoes and genetically modified wheat that somehow thrived in this alien soil. The colony had been humanity's pride for 15 years, a testament to their stubborn refusal to stay confined to one world. She never expected it to become a battlefield. The first sign came from the orbital defense platform. Commander Marcus Webb's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled panic. All colonists to emergency stations. We have multiple contacts approaching from the outer rim. This is not a drill. Sarah dropped her harvesting tools and ran toward the central command dome, her boots clanging against the metal walkways that connected the various structures. Around her, other colonists emerged from their workstations, faces painted with confusion and fear. The children from the education dome were being herded toward the underground shelters by their teachers. In the command center, holographic displays showed the approaching fleet. 47 ships of unknown design, their hulls dark and angular like insects carved from obsidian. They moved in perfect formation, too perfect for any human fleet. The lead vessels were massive, each one dwarfing the largest human battleships. Range in 6 hours, reported Lieutenant Torres from the defense console. I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the colony's xenobiologist, studied the alien ships with growing dread. The geometric patterns on their hulls, the way they move in complete synchronization. This isn't exploratory. This is military. Commander Webb's jaw tightened. Send a message on all frequencies. Standard first contact protocols. The response came within minutes, not through radio waves, but directly into their minds. The psychic intrusion felt like ice water flooding their thoughts, carrying words that bypassed their ears entirely. Human settlement detected. Resource allocation unacceptable. Surrender biological materials for processing. Resistance will result in total elimination. Several colonists collapsed, clutching their heads. The alien communication wasn't just words, but images flashing through their consciousness like a nightmare slideshow. They saw other worlds, other species that had refused the alien demand. Barren planets stripped of all life, their surfaces glassed and empty. Biological materials, Dr. Vasquez whispered, her face pale. They're not talking about our crops. The truth hit the command center like a physical blow. These aliens weren't interested in territorial conquest or resources in the traditional sense. They wanted the colonists themselves, wanted their bodies for some unspeakable purpose. The images in their minds showed processing facilities being strapped to tables, their life force drained away to power alien machinery. Webb activated the colony's emergency protocols. All defensive systems online. Prepare for siege conditions. Send a priority message to Earth Command. Full encryption. But as the alien fleet drew closer, their sensors revealed the horrible truth about their situation. The approaching ships carried more than advanced weapons. They carried billions of smaller craft, each one the size of a human torso, designed to penetrate any defense and extract living beings one by one. The aliens called themselves the Zephyrians, according to the data their ships broadcast. They had been harvesting intelligent life across the galaxy for millennia, using biological energy to power their civilization. Humans were just the latest species to catch their attention, and New Eden Colony was their testing ground. As night fell over the colony, the alien fleet took position in orbit. Their ships blocked out the stars, casting the agricultural domes in perpetual twilight. Sleep became impossible as the psychic pressure intensified, filling dreams with images of capture and consumption. In the underground shelters, families huddled together while the adults tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Children asked questions that had no good answers. Why were the aliens here? What do they want? When would help arrive? The harsh reality was that Earth was 47 light years away. Even faster than light communication would take weeks to reach home, and any rescue fleet would need months to arrive. The colonists were alone, facing an enemy that had conquered countless worlds and saw them as nothing more than resources to be harvested. But Sarah Chun, like many of the colonists, came from families that had survived Earth's darkest moments. Her grandmother had lived through the climate wars of 2157 and Her great-grandfather had been part of the Mars terraforming project when corporate raiders tried to claim the planet for themselves. Humans had always found ways to survive when survival seemed impossible. As she looked around the shelter at the faces of her neighbors, Sarah saw fear, yes, but also something else. The same stubborn determination that had driven their species to spread across the stars despite every obstacle the universe threw at them. The Zephyrians might have conquered other species, but they had never encountered humanity's most dangerous trait. When cornered, humans didn't just fight back. They adapted, they improvised, and they absolutely refused to go quietly into the night. The aliens were about to learn why Earth's children had inherited the galaxy, one impossible victory at a time. The siege of New Eden Colony was about to begin, and neither side truly understood what they were getting into.